Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to St Paul's, the Actors Church, for this memorial for Joss. It's good to see you here, despite the absolutely appalling weather. What can we say about Joss Ackland? What a monumental contribution he made to the British theatre scene. So it's good that you've come to the Actors Church to say thank you for his life, to remember, to share grief, and to comfort one another. It's also so good to see so many members of his family and friends here as well to celebrate. I'm sure, I actually first saw Joss in a show, didn't think it would run. It was a musical about the second wife of an Argentinian dictator who died of cancer at 32. Would never run. That was my first introduction to his work, and I saw a lot of his work subsequently, which was a great honour. And I'm sure he's gathered round him people of all faiths and perhaps of none, but if it's within your tradition, I invite you to join with me now in a prayer. We look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Today we come together to remember before God our brother Joss, to give thanks for his life, and to comfort one another in grief. Father in heaven, we thank you because you have made us in your own image and give us gifts in body, mind, and spirit. We thank you now for Joss, for what he meant to each one gathered here. As we honour his memory, make us more aware that you are the one from whom comes every perfect gift, including the gift of eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. We stand to sing our hymn, Morning Has Broken. Do please be seated. Take a seat.
I think I'll have to go there. Joss and I knew each other for 70 years. I hope you can hear me. Yes? Anyway, we met briefly at the Central School of Speech Training when we were both in our teens. Joss legally 18 or 19. I was there totally illegally, and I was 15, but I said I was 18, doesn't matter. We didn't see each other for a while. We both graduated from the school, and then Joss and I were at a play. I was standing at the back watching, and he was, I think, at the bar, and came over to me and said, do you remember, he loved this story, do you remember me? I'm Joss from Central School. Oh yes, said the little girl, I'm Claire. He said, oh, how nice. And what are you doing? I'm going to Stratford, said the little girl. Oh, how nice. And what are you going to play? I'm playing Ophelia. That rather floored him. And that was the end of that conversation. And then there's a pause of quite a few years where many things happened, both good and pretty dreadful. I went, after performing here and playing here, to America, and so I didn't know that during the period I was away, Joss and his family had had this tragic, beyond tragic accident, so to speak, when the house that Rosemary, his wonderful wife, and the children were in and about to be put to bed, suddenly burst into flames. Joss was at the theatre. He didn't know anything about it. It seemed to have been seen by neighbors because when Rosemary tried to get down the stairs, which were already on fire, the only thing she could do was to throw these little children out of the window, which she did. And they were all safely caught, and then Rosemary and baby in her arms threw themselves out. But alas, Rosemary was dreadfully injured, and her spine was very compromised. And she was taken, I don't know if she was taken directly to Stoke Mandeville, but anyway, she was. Joss came home from the theatre to find his children dispersed to all his friends, who were very kind and gave them beds, but he didn't know where they were, and his wife gone. Anyway, he located them all. He went, took a course to the hospital where both he and Rosemary were told that she would never walk again and she could never carry any more children. Rosemary, being Rosemary, both walked again and had 2 more children. She walked in a very charming way, not like a cripple, which is probably not a word used anymore, but she walked so daintily, and yet her feet were completely flat, and I don't know how she moved her legs. But they went on with their lives, which were nearly destroyed, but were not. And I think before that, Joss had had a very bad period as an actor, which we all have from time to time, and he went to South Africa with Rosemary and I think 2 children then to become a tea planter, which was not his forte, and failed, and came home. And at about this time, I came back from America, and we did together at Chichester a so-so production of The Cherry Orchard, Joss and I playing brother and sister. After that, however, we were both together in a wonderful production of A Streetcar Named Desire, in which Joss was the most extraordinary, sad, kind, frightened, vulnerable, many, many, many things as Mitch, and was recognized as being absolutely wonderful, which indeed he was. However, next and last for us came Shadowlands, the television, which for both Joss and myself were, the highlight is a very poor word, were great achievements in every way. It was directed by Norman Stone, who's here today, and it was made in Cardiff, and it was about C.S. Lewis and his Jewish-American wife, Joy Davidson, whom he did not love, he distrusted her, he wasn't sure about her, and he was a trifle, I hate to say, anti-Semitic. But then he gradually began to understand her, and she fell madly in love with him, and he eventually did with her, and they married twice, once before and once after. But Joy got cancer and left him after very few years of happiness together, and left him sadly alone. This is not unlike the story of Joss and Rosemary Ackland, because as well as having these dreadful injuries on her spine, the fates were kind enough to give Rosemary muscular dystrophy on top of that, which was doom carrying, is all I can say. And they were together, of course, every minute, as they always had been, as she was always there for him and went on location and went on tour. And Rosemary and Joss were completely as one, and I can only think of them that way. And if I ever say, whenever I say Joss, I nearly always say Joss and Rosemary. Rosemary died, and Joss was left alone in Clovelly, beautiful house that he had there. I think he was very lonely. I know the children came, of course. I went much too infrequently because it was a heck of a long way away, and I don't drive. But I think he was lonely. On the other hand, he was a painter. He had, in fact, got into Slade before he decided to go to the Central. And he painted, he watched movies every afternoon, some of them quite dreadful, but I don't think he minded as long as it passed the time. And he in effect, and the children may not quite agree with this, waited to be with Rosemary in Clovelly churchyard. And eventually he was. And now he is. And one can only say no two people deserved a quieter, peaceful ending together as they did, as they do, as they will, whatever one wants to wish. Thank you so much.
This is from Joss's autobiography. Eventually, the magic moment arrives. I hit the jackpot. I'm offered a role in a major movie. It is only one day's work as a policeman in the Bolting Brothers film, 7 Days to Noon, but it is a good scene, and I know that this is the breakthrough I have longed for. I could be a star. The film is about a mad professor who wants to blow up London, and in my scene, I have to rush from the telephone to my sergeant with the following words. I say, Sarge, I've got a message here from Mrs. Emily Georgina Pickett of 70 Clesby Road. She's got a lodger who has been acting queer and putting the wind up her. Here's the description. Small, bald, with a dark brown overcoat. I think it's this bloke who wants to blow up London. And the sergeant says, what do you expect, a medal? I learn the piece, and I get a very early tube train to the studios, where I rehearse the scene with Roy Bulting, the director. He seems very pleased, and I even have the courage to put in a comedy trip on my exit. Very good, he smiles. Now, we'll break for lunch and then shoot the scene straight away. I turn to go, but he calls me back. Oh, by the way, there are one or two little changes in the script. Perhaps you can tidy them up over lunch. It is not Pickett, it is Peckett. It is not Clesby, it is Clisby. It is not 70, it is 13. And it is not a dark brown overcoat, it is a light grey raincoat. See to that, will you? Boggle-eyed, I go off to lunch and concentrate on the changes. After lunch, I stand on the set in uniform. My makeup is powdered down and my hands clenched tight with concentration. Action, says Ray Bolting. I open a door and enter the office energetically. I say, Sarge, I've got a message here from Mrs. Emily Georgina Peckett of 13 Clisby Road. She's got a lodger who has been acting queer and putting the wind up her. Here's his description. Small, bald, with a light grey raincoat. I think it's this bloke who wants to blow up London. Breathlessly, I stopped speaking and stared at the sergeant, whose eyes glazed over. "I'm terribly sorry, I've dried," he said. "Never mind," said Roy Bulting. "Take two." Once more, I was powdered. Once more, I opened the door. Once more, I tore through my speech with all the correct changes. "Whoa, hold it," called Roy Bulting. "Cut! Will someone paint those white drawers? They are too light." The drawers were darkened. My face was powdered, and my confidence wilted. "Action," said Roy Bulting. I rushed through the door. "I say, Sarge, I've got a message here from Mrs. Emily Georgina Peckett of 13 Clisby Road. Sorry, Clisby. Take 4. "I say, Sarge, I've got a message here from Mrs. Emily Georgina Peckett. Take 5. 70 Clisby. Sorry, 13 Clisby. Take after take. Worse and worse. The sweat drips from me. After take 12, Roy Bulting suggests we stop and have a cup of tea. He comforts me by telling me that Orson Welles had an incredible number of takes for one line in The Third Man. We start again. Despite the tea, my mouth is dry and my speech becomes a series of anagrams. The studio door opens and John Bulting leads in a group of men and announces, "Normally we don't allow visitors on the set, but today we have 20 members of the Australian Parliament and they have never seen any filming before." Take 25. John Bulting discreetly leads 20 members of the Australian Parliament out of the studio. I babble on. After 48 takes, we stop. They have 2 possibles in the can. I leave the studios, get on a tube train, and fall asleep. When I awake, the train has gone back and forth on its journey. My life in the movies is over. The next day, I meet an actor in the street, and he asks me if I'm working. "Oh, I've just done a bit on 7 Days to Noon," I say, grandly. "Really?" he says. "Do you know, I believe there was some poor devil there yesterday who had 48 takes." My life in the movies is definitely over.
Excuse me, guys. Joss Ackland. Okay, isn't this a wonderful occasion? All you wonderful people here celebrating the life of, well, arguably the finest man of the 20th century. And I say that without any reservations at all. He was well, already Claire said it, he was a mighty man. He was in many ways, physically, of course, but he had an awareness of life which was quite extraordinary. He seemed to have his finger on every pulse. He knew what was going on all over, maybe not in his private life, I don't know. By the way, this house could have been filled with his children and relatives if they had only been told about it without anybody else at all. He was most amazing. You guys, it's fantastic that you're here, and you're here to say goodbye to that glorious man. He had a sense of humor which, well, we all know, an enormous sense of humor, and that picture on the front of the program shows him smiling and like you're doing now. It's wonderful, you're smiling, thinking about Joss Ackland. And he was riddled with empathy. He seemed to understand everything that was going on in your life. If there were disturbances, and he would understand and never be sentimental about it, but would respond with lovely, beautiful, that smile and that laugh, that laugh. God, I mean, it reached from here to Piccadilly Circus. Unbelievable. And of course, he was the most wonderful father and husband, as you were saying. If anything, that marriage was made in heaven. Anyway, I'm not here to sing his praises, except that I just have. I've worked with them several times, but not very significantly, except on one occasion in a play called Never the Sinner. And that play was about maybe the young people don't remember this, but about two young students in America and Chicago, 18 and 19, who decided that they were going to commit the perfect murder. And they killed a 14-year-old boy who they didn't know, and wondered if that was going to work, whether they get away with it. Well, they didn't, of course. And so they were arrested and taken to trial. And they were called Leopold and Loeb, their surnames. In that, I played the prosecuting counsel, someone who was called Pugnacious and Severe. Well, that's a lifetime summed up, if you like. Joss, of course, played the great defense counsel, Clarence Darrow, who succeeded in court more times than any other defense counsel in the history of American law, and played this part simply magnificently in the play. So I'm going to now read from the summing up that Clarence Darrow gave on that occasion. I will not attempt to characterize it as Joss so gloriously did. Your Honor, in the last 6 weeks, I have heard nothing but a cry for blood. I have heard from the office of the state's attorney only ugly hate. I have heard a court implored to hang two boys in the face of science, in the face of philosophy, in the face of humanity, in the face of all the better and humane thoughts of the age, all in the name of justice. I have stood here as one might stand trying to sweep back the tide. I wish to make no false pretenses to this court. The easiest thing and the most popular thing to do would be to hang my clients. I know it. Men and women who do not think will applaud. The cruel and thoughtless will approve. It will be easy. Today, by stretching out over this land more and more fathers and mothers, the humane, the kind, and the hopeful, who are gaining an understanding not only of these two boys, but of their own as well, they will cause no acclaim for the death of my clients. They would ask that the shedding of blood be stopped. Your Honor now stands between the future and the past. I know the future is with me and what I stand for here. I am pleading for life and understanding. I am pleading for the infinite mercy that considers all. I am pleading for a time when hatred and cruelty will not control the hearts of men, when we can learn by reason and judgment and understanding that mercy is the highest attribute of man. And it is all that will someday, redeem us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, to be part of this, because it's just glorious to remember Joss. And my name is Bonnie Langford, and I played Peter Pan opposite Joss in Peter Pan, the musical. And it was extraordinary that he took part in it, because he had not long before taken part in the National Theatre production of it. But I believe that in that rehearsal period, he arrived for the read-through on the first day, and they read the play. And at the end of this particular read-through, the director, I shan't name him, turned round and said, "Now, from now on, for the next 10 days, we are all going to come into this rehearsal room and be children." Joss stood up, grabbed his fedora and said, call me when you've reached puberty. I mean, you can... But what I believe, the reason I believe he particularly wanted to play Captain Hook to my Peter Pan in the musical was because when, as you mentioned, Miss Bloom, when you mentioned that he was a tea planter in South Africa, I believe he had a radio program and he would play the score written by Julie Stein and Comden and Green, and he adored it. So he very graciously agreed to play the mighty Captain Hook to my Peter Pan. Now, he was magnificent, as you say. He's statuesque and mighty, and I was this tiddly little 21-year-old. And he kept saying, we're not going to make it Peter Pan on ice, darling. Ice. But he said he was also extremely camp because he insisted on wearing 3 red sequins on his eyelids. He said it was because there was a part in the book that says Captain Hook's eyes shone blood red. I think he just loved the idea of wearing sequins on his eyelids. And anyway, we had to take part, you know, there was a lot of fun and camp about it, but actually he was very, very frightening, especially when you're small and you have to fight him with a sword. So he would take great glee in his, you know, prowess, physical prowess over me. And then, of course, Peter, spoiler alert, has to win this final fight. But on one particular performance, I shall never, ever forget it. He was really going hammer and tongs at me, and we were fighting away with these swords. And he took one mighty swipe at me, and then turned to go upstage to this corner where he was going to come at me with his sword in one final deadly conquest. What he didn't realize as he turned upstage was that my sword had shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, so I was utterly defenseless. Well, I didn't know what to do. I was panicking. I was thinking, good gosh, he's actually going to kill me. And so I just sort of turned into this mad karate-type person, throwing my legs, I think really probably a bit more like Kung Fu Panda, actually, and I was going, ha! And going, ha! Ha! Like this at him, thinking, what am I going to do? And I was going, no sword! No sword! And I was pointing at him madly, and he still was coming at me, and I'm going, no sword! No sword! And he got to the center of the stage, and the light bulb went off. He dropped his sword in a very camp manner, ran off to the gangplank where he was going to be eaten by the crocodile, turned back to me and went, ah, the poison finger. This is from Peter Pan. I have a place where dreams are born and time is never planned. It's not on any chart, you must find it in your heart. Never, never land. It might be miles beyond the moon, or right there where you stand. Just think of lovely things and your heart will fly on wings in never, never land. You'll have a treasure if you stay there, more precious far than gold, for once you have found your way there, you can never, never grow old. And that's my home where dreams are born and time is never planned. Just think of lovely things and your heart will fly on wings forever in never, never land.
fired? Well, not a soul up.
Nobody in the engine room?
She's deserted.
Well, hello, Neville. Anything wrong?
I'm still at the village. I'm staying at the hotel.
The Queen's Head?
I know it sounds absurd, Philip, but I can't leave here. I've got to go back to that place.
Right. Annalise. D'Artagnan!
I have found my old comrade.
It's just like old times.
So. I'd only use it as a last resort, when all else has failed.
You're not going, Joe.
Oh, yes, I am.
You'll be back for dinner.
The old chap, you and me's not two figures that should be seen together in London.
Joe.
You think that I'm proud. But you shall never see me no more in these clothes. I'm wrong out of the forge, out of the kitchen, or off the marshes. You won't find half so much fault in me if you come to the forge window and see Joe the blacksmith in his old burnt apron, sticking down to the old work.
Dr. Chambers tells me that you have persuaded him to allow you to discontinue drinking porter with your meals.
It needed very little persuasion, Papa.
I questioned him very closely as to the comparative strength-giving values of porter and milk, and he was forced to admit that porter came decidedly first.
You insisted on starting your own military intelligence operation because you said that my Secret Service...
There's no one fired? Well, not a soul up.
Nobody in the engine room?
She's deserted.
Well, hello, Neville. Anything wrong?
Don't you just love live theatre? Right, we're going to try reloading it. We rehearsed it was all fine, so we're going to try reloading it. If we can't make it work, what we may do is show it afterwards over the food and drink. But we'll have one more go to see if we can make this work. If not, we'll press on and we'll show it when we've got it sorted.
I think Joss would want the show to go on, so I'll just do my bit. We met in Nairobi for the shoot of White Mischief and hit it off immediately, both on and off the set. It's such a relief to work opposite an actor who is comfortable in himself as a person, happy, warm, stable, kind, generous, aspiring to the highest standards, and aware of the privilege of having a good gig. And what a gig that was. The chance to play real-life characters, researched in such detail by James Fox in his book, filming in many of the actual dreamy locations where the events had taken place, directed by lovely Mike Bradford. And the cast were, well, unparalleled. But it was Joss's performance as Jock Broughton that stole the show. He was prepared to strip away all guard and vanity and reveal the underbelly of a weak and tortured soul. In those 3 weeks in Africa, yes, only 3 weeks, the next 5 weeks of the shoot, we were schlepping to Shepperton in the snow. I got to spend many happy times with Joss and Rosemary, who reminisced much about their adventurous year in Malawi in the 50s. Who could not enjoy hanging out with them? The happiest couple I ever knew, always holding hands, always curious and enthusiastic and playful, forever relishing the joy of having found each other. Their warmth and zest for life brought the company together for many a convivial and relaxing dinner after shooting days. They knew how important it is to celebrate life and togetherness. I always think of Joss every last day of February. You see, he only had a birthday every 4 years. We were having a jolly dinner in the hotel in Nairobi approaching midnight on February the 28th in 1987. Joss checked his watch, raised his glass, and announced, "Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to..." Oh no, it's not my birthday anymore. Clearly, a well-rehearsed party piece, no doubt, played throughout his life from early childhood, very early childhood. I loved his playful, idiotic sense of humor, alternating with gravitas, serious issues, politics, and the easy way he would round off even the deepest thoughts with a hearty chuckle. And that voice, emanating from a comfortable place deep within a large, resonating frame, across baritone chords like melted butterscotch, as Peter Bradshaw wrote, and out through a broad, handsome smile. No wonder Rosie was in love with him for 50 years. I shared with Joss and Rosie a passion for Italy and visited them many times at their place near Orvieto, where they adored to shop for local product in the village market. Many a time in Covent Garden too, and Paris, Los Angeles, Chichester, where Rosemary would effortlessly put together a sumptuous spread. They put me onto their favorite camisa store in Old Compton Street, where they were well-loved regulars, and got me addicted to Camisa's anchovy-stuffed olives. Remember those? Being more or less the same age as their daughters, I found it very comfortable to be enveloped in the care and warmth they offered me. For all his love of and place in the theatre, Joss put family first. He was so proud of them all, gruff at times and ever more disparaging about the ways of the modern world, but ever caring and focused on family. Mike Bradford told me he had asked the great director Michael Cimino for advice on whether to cast Joss. Joss had just starred in Cimino's The Sicilian, playing a lead role as a mafia boss. Cimino stated that Joss would have been a major movie star if he had not had such a large family. But Joss had no regrets. In his epilogue for My Better Half and Me, "I still love and enjoy our vast family. Life's luster has gone, but that does not depress me too much, because I anticipate flames rekindling when I depart. I can die with that, because when I go through that door, you know who I mean to join." I loved working with him, as have many decades of actors, many here today, including some of the cast of volunteers, young and old, who very willingly came together under the directorship of Jonathan Miller for Joss's King Lear, his final performance at the Old Vic in 2013. It was a rehearsed reading that raised funds for the Motor Neuron Disease Association. Joss had prepared for 85 years for this role, perfecting his long white hair, long beard, wild-eyed look that a lifetime of stagecraft and emotional experience brought to the most touching Lear, all world weariness and whimsy and bewilderment. I got a message from Anthony Andrews to read out. He had meant to come today. He was very, very sad that he couldn't make it because of illness. How to describe Joss? Larger than life, with a heart and generosity to match. A bon vivant with exquisite taste, who could root out the very best and find joy wherever he was in the world. A man for whom the joy and thrill of living overcame the setbacks, sadness, and tragedies that touched him and his wonderful family. Somehow, he remained cheerful through it all. When I was a very young actor, I had the privilege of working with Joss on a movie called Operation Daybreak, which was all filmed in Prague. What a privilege it was to be working with an icon of film and theatre, whom I learnt so much from. But also to see his positivity. He always found wonderful things to do, even behind the Iron Curtain. I recall we had a few days off. We were having supper in a charming little restaurant. The food was foul, and all of a sudden Joss said, "Let's go to Vienna." Next thing, we were taking the night train to Vienna. Typical of him. We were neighbours for many years. We were in Wimbledon. Joss and Rosemary had a fantastic house in Kingston. He would call up unexpectedly of an evening and say, "Come on over, I've got someone for you to meet." And I'd find Jack Lemmon or Deborah Carr around his table. A most extraordinary man. I loved him. Andrew's words remind me of many spontaneous gatherings and how easy it was to pick up the phone to Joss to chat about anything. Love life problems, agent problems, professional triumphs, professional horrors, the wonders of wildlife in our gardens, his sadness and dismay at so many broken down marriages. He would go through a gamut of expressions, rage against the modern world, and always lots of giggles and affection and love. When, over 10 years ago now, my agent called me with a last-minute straight offer to play Desiree in a little night music at the Châtelet in Paris, no less. Kristen Scott Thomas had dropped out 3 days before Christmas, and rehearsals were starting in 2 weeks. So I had to make up my mind. I had only 2 hours to give an answer. I was terrified. I'd never been a good singer, and I was in a quandary. So I phoned a friend. Joss said to me, "It's a wonderful piece. I had the best time I've ever had in the theatre, and if you don't do it, I will never speak to you again." I loved how he would do that dramatic, stern voice, or outraged voice, always followed by that chuckle. Well, I did do the show, and he was right, of course. And in spite of my weak singing, it was a gift of a role. Which brings me, are we ready for this, or shall I? Good, because it's perfectly timed to introduce a wonderful singer. We're going to hear someone who, like her grandfather, has been gifted with a musical ear and a beautiful voice. It is Joss's daughter, Tony's daughter, Izzy Yardley, and on the piano, Michael Robbins. Thank you.
Isn't it rich? Are we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you in mid-air. Send in the clouds. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around and one who can't move. Where are the clouds? Send in the clouds. Just when I'd stopped opening doors, finally knowing the one that I wanted was yours, making my entrance again with my usual flair, sure of my life. No one is there. Don't you love farce? My fault, I fear. I thought that you'd want what I want. Sorry, my dear. But where are the clowns? Quick, send in the clowns. Don't bother, they're here. Isn't it rich? Isn't it queer? Losing my timing this late in my career. Where are the clowns? There ought to be clowns. Well, maybe next year.
Acting is genetic, isn't it? Wow. Now, do we think it's going to work? Let's give it a go.
There's no one forward.
Well, not a soul aft. Nobody in the engine room.
She's deserted.
Well, hello, Neville. Anything wrong?
I'm still at the village. I'm staying at the hotel.
The Queen's Head?
I know it sounds absurd, Philip, but I can't leave here. I've got to go back to that place.
Right. Annalise. D'Artagnan! I have found my old comrade. It's just like old times.
So. I'd only use it as a last resort, when all else has failed.
You're not going, Joe.
Oh, yes, I am.
You'll be back for dinner.
The old chap, you and me's not two figures that should be seen together in London.
Joe.
You think that I'm proud, but you shall never see me no more in these clothes. I'm wrong out of the forge, out of the kitchen, or off the marshes. You won't find half so much fault in me if you come to the forge window and see Joe the blacksmith in his old burnt apron, sticking down to the old work.
Dr. Chambers tells me that you have persuaded him to allow you to discontinue drinking porter with your meals.
It needed very little persuasion, Papa.
I questioned him very closely as to the comparative strength-giving values of porter and milk, and he was forced to admit that porter came decidedly first.
You insisted on starting your own military intelligence operation because you said that my Secret Service wasn't giving the army the intelligence it wanted. You then proceeded to set up a team in the neutral countries, which has compromised and endangered my own agents at every turn. In the process, you produced absolutely nothing in the way of useful intelligence. But you most certainly have made some impact.
This is going to blow up in my face, isn't it? I lost bigger than I ever thought I'd win.
That was a lot of pressure, sir. I mean, who knew what the judge was going to do when he was faced with having to put Santa Claus in the nut house?
He isn't Santa Claus. What the hell is the matter with everybody? There is no Santa Claus!
Come, my dear. I'll take you to him.
Light my way, child of love.
Light my way, child of love.
Shine on me, child of love.
Shine on me, child of love.
Be my eyes, child of love.
Be my eyes, child of love.
Oh, this is,
Oh, Palmer.
Oh, yes, of course, Palmer. I almost walked straight past you. You were planning to travel with anyone?
Only with the rest of the coach.
I mean, did you plan to sit with anyone?
No,
May I?
of course.
My dear Don Massino, if we forgive the kidnapping of Prince Borsa, we will lose all respect.
I agree. Let me make one final effort to reason with Juliana.
Shakespeare had a good quote. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man.
I was going to say, there's